Alright everybody, so here we go with round 5. I am facing an Irish FIDE master and I'm hoping this game is gonna give you a glimpse into a new method of playing chess. Because at beginner level, most of the times your games are gonna be getting decided by a tactic. But above 2000 in general, it all comes down to weak squares and weak pawns. Alright, so here we go. My opponent starts the game with knight f3 and I'm going for the king's Indian, except when they do the kingside fianchetto so early, I'm going for the Magnus Carlsen approach. I'm experimenting with the double fianchetto. And this is connected with a pretty interesting idea that can generate enough play to try and win with the black pieces, which is a very challenging task against this opening that my opponent is playing, basically. You can think of it as if it was a FIFA game, he is playing park the bus strategy. Not really, I mean, saying my opponent already plays for a draw or anything like that. It is just a rock solid, almost impossible to defeat. And after d4, the key move is to go for this knight swap, because natural move like queen c2 can be met with knight c3, and the double pawns can get really vulnerable in this line after knight c6, knight a5. But my opponent went for the trade and then bishop to f4. So he's going for simple development, but yeah, I mean, black just equalizes with natural developing moves. And at this point, he somewhat surprised me with this bishop e5. But to be honest, it does make sense since my fianchetto bishop was getting significantly stronger after my last c5 move. And at this point, I can take, or I can play the move that I did, which is d6, inviting opponent to make the trade. And the biggest decision that white has to do is, okay, do you push, take space? That would be natural. Do you take on c5, or maybe simple e3, trying to keep the center? There are many options available. In my opinion, most ambitious would have been to play for d5, but my opponent starts with queen d2. Queen d2, flexible, keeping options, just a natural good move in general, connecting the rooks. And knowing that this move is on the agenda, knight c6, d5 is allowing that push to happen with a tempo. So yeah, I just felt more natural during the game that I should try and play knight d7, where my opponent surprised me with dc5, giving me a simple decision. You guys can try to pause the video and think about how would you recapture, but towards the center is the answer. Creating open file for the rook, getting ready to pressure that pawn on b2. And yeah, I'm quite liking the way this is going, because the position just got imbalanced. And against the check, I have easy move, no need to block with f6, as that would feel pretty weakening, and also no need to self-pin. So I went king back, and after knight d2, the bishop trade is forced, and this is where the interesting part begins. Weak squares and weak pawns. How do we go about it? It's an interesting question, because as for now, there are simply no weak squares and no weak pawns to play for. We'll have to create them. But against h4, I start with knight f6, of course, stopping my opponent's idea of pushing. And then I'm looking to play on the queen side with rook b8. And after b3, you'll have to find the key move to actually get the ball rolling for black. So please feel free to pause the video and try to come up with a great idea when the pawn will get pushed to b3. My opponent started with knight f3. I go rook a b8. And now This is the trick. A5. A very critical move. My opponent plays rook b1, but I am ready to get my weakest pawn, the isolated pawn. You can think of it as a plain t-shirt, but we just slap a Gucci logo on top of it. Because I'm considering to play a4. Considering to play a4, trading my weak pawn for a very solid pawn on b3. Now, technically speaking, you can take that. It's a temporary sacrifice. But then you're going to be left with 3 isolated pawns. So my opponent starts queen e3, targeting e7. Now, I do have a choice, but the key idea was that I didn't want to play e6 as that will make d6 pawn vulnerable, not protected by a pawn anymore. So maybe rook d1 and the pawn could become a target. I protect with the queen, so keeping this little pawn chain intact. And I just know that within the next moves, we will create the weak pawn. After knight g5, takes on b3, takes on b3, target created. But first, you also want to keep an eye on these pieces. We can notice a knight placed inside our half. I start with rook b6. Rook to b6, preparing to double up. We have rook b2. The double up. Notice how black rooks are way more active than white rooks. h6, downgrading opponent's most active piece. Knight f3 and now king g7, defending against the threat. Queen to c3. And now I need to improve my last piece. The queen is actually not doing that much on c7. So queen to b7. Notice how I got the triple stack. All of my pieces lined up on the weak pawn. Queen e4. Just a centralizing move, not really coming with a threat, but just making life difficult for my opponent. Maybe looking to play some queen g4. Queen to d3. Queen to d3, and also important to mention, my opponent's time is quite limited. We are approaching a bit of a time scramble. At this point, I have interesting decision. Maybe queen f5 was possible, but I went for the trade and then e5, fixing pawn on d3. And at this point, when he played knight e1, I felt like it's all a matter of trying to fight for these weak squares. So I think I played knight g8, but it was very interesting to actually try out e4. I think e4 was close to winning practically. Would have made a very difficult position for my opponent. Knight g8, knight c2, knight e7. And I simply forgot that my opponent is preparing b4. I cannot allow b5 to get the protected passed pawn. I was thinking he just wants to reroute towards the square, but now I have to take, and once he no longer has a weak pawn, we are getting an equal knight endgame. I think, yeah, this should be about 80% a draw, but we will play it out. So f5, king e3, g5, pawns are getting swapped. We're just going with the flow at this point. My opponent went g4, which felt a bit risky as f4, king e4. His king is in a mating net almost. But I cannot play knight g8 because the knight d5 and my knight is getting dominated. So this can also backfire for me. If I trade knights, then I could be losing. So here I almost lost on time, but came up with knight c8, and after d4, after getting a pawn trade, knight to b6, I started to realize that my knight from e5 is going to target both of his weak pawns. So after knight c3, knight e5, my opponent has only one move to make a draw, but it's not easy. And he goes king e4, but suddenly all the pawns are starting to drop in domino effect. Knight c7 check, central king. Knight goes back. I mean, I'm just a pawn eater at this point. I'm just collecting every pawn that I can, and after knight f6, offering the knight trade, his knight is getting trapped, and the pawns start to march down. And opponent resigns. I have to say, got really lucky with the endgame win. But overall, a pretty solid game despite missing some chances. Currently, I have 4 wins out of 5 games, and I'm playing against a candidate master in the next round. But I just wanted to thank you guys for making it all the way this far into the video. Give it a like if you want, and I'll catch you in the next one.